All right, happy New Year's Eve. Taking the time to kind of do a few little wrap-ups of garden projects that I've had going all year. It's like the bottle gourds, and then also the radishes. So this is one that I started in well, I've been researching it for a while, and then I planted them this fall. And so radishes, a lot of people say they were first documentable back to Egypt. And so the thought is they kind of came from the Middle East and spread to both Europe and then to Asia. New evidence based on DNA sequencing says, well, we're actually dealing with a lot of concurrent domestication. There were at least two pockets, one in the Middle East, East Asia, and then one in, West Asia, and then one in Far East Asia, kind of the coastal areas. And then the coastal Asian areas stayed specific to Asia, whereas the more Mid-East Mediterranean ones kind of then were the ones that the Greeks knew and then spread up into Europe. So there's also theories that there is a black radish domesticated on its own in Europe. But anyway, without further ado, so I did a whole bunch of searching to try to find seed sources for these more older types of radishes, specifically focusing on the long black and the long white European radishes pictured in the Ticunum sagittalis, which is the medieval health book from the 1400s. So where I eventually did find seed sources for the long black radishes, it was past the time, sowing time, which in my area here is around September. But so I went ahead and sowed the black radish that is fairly common and easy to find, which is the round black Spanish radish, which is this one here. I also found a delightful beer radish, which if you get them wet, you can see that they're like this delightful maroon color and definitely has that shape that is pictured in the Ticunum sagittalis, the medieval health handbook. Since then, I have found other German beer radishes that are white that I look forward to growing, but this just happened to be a red one that I found. Or it's actually not red, it's this beautiful maroonish kind of color. It's just gorgeous. And then for comparison, I also grew some daikons. This one I've already cut off the bottom. It's a little bit too big, so it's getting kind of pulpy on the inside. But just as a comparison, some daikons and then also some white icicle radishes. So with all of that, without further ado, let me grab a knife and we can cut into these guys and take a closer look. All right, so cross section of this black Spanish radish. This is just such a beautiful radish. It's really fun. It's a long-term winter keeper. And so with that, there's three main types of radishes. There's the spring radishes that we all think of, those little bundles of red, joyous, spicy balls. And then there's some summer radishes. And then there's also the fall or winter storage radishes, which are these guys, which are the ones that I have been focusing on. And so it has a nice thick black skin to it, almost kind of sandpapery in texture, and then you open it up and what? Just this delightful, beautiful white flesh. If you take a bite of it, super crispy. And oh, so radishy pungity. Although, not as much as the black Spanish radishes I've bought at the store in the past. I wonder, we just had a recent snowfall and frost for a few days. I wonder if that kind of helped mellow things out, or maybe it's because it's a slightly smaller, younger one. I don't know. But so that's what a black Spanish radish is. And the recipes that are pre-1600s that call for this talk about like grating them up over salads, dressing them with a little bit of vinegar and some salt. Okay. And then we have our German beer radish. You are going to see some damage from root weevils, I'm sure of it. Yay, happily not too much. So you can see there's a few spots there of the damage, but it's not that bad. All right, and then what does this taste like? I'm cutting it so I make sure not to eat a worm. So again, delightful purple flesh, white crunchiness, and I'm sure you can hear it. Still a really good crunch. There goes the radish. So that nice peppery radish tones. This almost has a sweetness to it that the black one does not have. So that's really fun. And then the daikon, it's pretty standard daikon, but again, I let these grow a little too big. That's fun. and definitely a much more mellow taste. And this is a very modern daikon. It's a mihowaze, I think is the name of it. It was just one that I could find on the supermarket shelves, or not supermarket shelves, in the seed shelves at my garden center. So nice, crunchy, pretty mellow, nice thin skin. It has a little bit more slightly meaty umami taste to it. Not quite as sweet and high as the other ones, but definitely it has like more layers of flavor than the black one. I don't know. I wonder if that's a representative sample of the black. I don't know. Anyway, next stop, continuing on to the pickles. That's a lot of radish going on right now. All right, so another way that a lot of the times that it's described in the pre-1600 cookbooks is that you pickle it. And so I did a few different quick pickle techniques. So I didn't, and the first one here is really fun to look at. Oh, it's so gorgeous and purpley. And so this is that maroon German beer radish. I just did thin slices dressed with a little bit of white vinegar and salt. And it's kind of fun. You can see how the coloring from the skin is kind of transferring into the white flesh. It's a pickled radish. Yeah, holds up well. Texture's nice. I mean, nothing too surprising one way or another. It's just a pickled radish. And then, so this is the black pickled radish. I left the skin on again, but it's interesting that this skin isn't bleeding into the water at all. It's holding shape. So it's kind of this really cool coloring combination. Skin's not as crunchy. It's a little bit more mushy. Almost meat-esque. That's kind of cool. Ooh, the skin though. The skin is very robust. There's a different texture to it. So I think if I was pickling these again, I would, yeah, I would peel them at least with the black radishes before I go in. And then this is a quick little daikon radish pickle I did. Hanging out in the bottom in the sledge are some old icicle radishes, which are modern long white radishes that are all very carroty shapey. They were quick, they were tasty, but they certainly weren't winter radishes, and so I'm focused more on the winter radishes. And so daikon radish in a quick pickle. It is hard to beat a daikon. That's gorgeous. And the reason why this pickling liquid's a little bit pink is because I originally pickled my icicle radishes in a little bit of air juice with some grapes that had started to turn color, and so that grape color then transferred into the liquid, and then it transferred into the icicle radishes that were in here originally, which is really cool. But okay, so far out of all those, my favorite pickle is the daikon pickle. Just so much more meatier and good, almost tastes, crunches and bites like an apple. Whereas the black Spanish one kind of, it has a different toothsomeness. It's like just, it doesn't have quite the crunch, but it's solid. And then the beer radish is good. Whoa. But boy, does it pack a crunch. I could see having a few steins in these, and that would be a lovely thing. All right, and next up, venture on to roasted radishes. So in some of the pre-1600s sources I was looking at, oftentimes they were usually like calling it a rapon or a napion, or they were kind of like a rapini, and then there was like several different names, and they were always kind of clustered with the turnips and other root vegetables, winter root vegetables, which makes sense if you're going up for a winter storage radish kind of thing. Sure. So I roasted them a couple different ways, although I'm still looking for a recipe that specifically calls out for radishes being roasted this way, but I went ahead and tossed them in. And so, excuse me, radishes. Yikes. I got my humor is flowing. So a couple different ways I took both the black and this red or maroon beer German radish and wrapped them as you would in, like you would with potatoes. So wrap them in aluminum foil and then toss them in the coals in the fire, and a fire that we had going a couple of weeks ago. You take them out, and oh my goodness, it was such a delight, because, you know, well, everything gets a modifier, right? A positive modifier being cooked in fire. And then you unwrap the aluminum, and this had turned into this delightful, sweet, mushy yet tender flesh, much like a potato or much like a roasted turnip, except it like had additional layers of flavor and also a little bit more sweet. So with turnips being closer, both radishes and turnips are in the Brassicaceae family, but turnips are a little bit closer to kind of cabbages and kales. And so I find with turnips you still kind of get that kale, right, gluconate. Anyway, it's a specific chemical kind of weighing to your turnips, or that, you know, is very kind of like a summer kale when it's been out in the heat too long. Not all that pleasant, but the radishes did not have that at all, which was awesome. So I was like, well, that was great. But what happens when I'm just hanging out in my house and I don't want to make a fire to roast radishes? And so I tried roasting them, pan roasting them in the oven like you would just rough chop them, drizzle them with olive oil and salt, and then, you know, 350 for a little bit with a couple of stirrings in between. And happily enough, success. So let's see here. We'll start with the black-skinned ones. And so these are those black-skinned ones. And you can see they have kind of little roasty bits on them and everything. So they dried out a little bit more. So I might next time just like cut them in half and put them face down and try them that way, using that thick skin to kind of seal in the moisture and the juiciness. But otherwise, this is so fun and so tasty. I'm so excited to have discovered roasting radishes. I didn't know it was a thing, and now it does. And oh my gosh. Oh. So again, with this though, much like if you're roasting like a delicata squash, even though the skin is thin, it's not the most pleasant to eat. Same holds true for the black radish. That thick skin is really kind of getting in the way of the flavor. But otherwise, it's just this beautiful, sweet, creamy texture of winter root vegetable. It's like the epitome of snuggling and reading books. I adore that. So happy. And so, with that too, here is the red-skinned one, that German beer radish. So again, cooked up. The skin held its color pretty well. You can still, it's kind of slightly red, but it's kind of also just more gennaro, brownish roasted. The skin on this one. Ooh, and it's still the sweeter type. Oh wow, I will take that over a carrot, roasted carrot any day. That is really fun. Although we're starting to build some of that Brassicaceae root vegetable, so if you're not a fan of turnips and rutabagas, this might be fun to try, but after a few you might start to get that buildup of that kind of turnipy taste. And then I also roasted a few daikons, and you can see how few are left. These were popular as well, although they roast up much faster, and so whereas the flesh for these is really tasty, it got a lot more dried out, and they actually got overcooked, which gave them a little bit of a bitter flavor. But this guy, this maroon, oh, that is beautiful. And I'm really excited about this cooking process because in the past I've bought the black Spanish round radishes in the supermarket thinking, oh, this will be fun. I didn't know what to do with them, and so I just kind of tried to eat them. Not for the faint of heart. Some people really, really do enjoy that, and it is spicy, and if you like horseradish, you'd probably like this a lot too. But roasted, these were fun. So, roasted radishes, I encourage you to give it all a whirl. I think it'll add a delightful bit to your winter side dishes, or maybe even your main dishes. Once again, for the winter radishes, though, you need to plant them in the late summer, early fall, so they get a growth size enough so that they can hold well in the soil. And then if you live in an area where the soil freezes pretty deep, you might consider lifting them and bringing them as you would turnips and rutabagas and kind of putting them in your cold cellar. But a fantastic way to get tons of vitamin C and other nutrients in the winter. Roasted root radishes. So next step for that is then I'm going to try planting some in the spring again, and then next fall I'm very excited to try my long black radishes and my long white radishes and see how those grow. So hope all is well. I hope you're staying safe, and I wish you a very happy New Year's.